I'm not one to typically make news videos, but I do love talking about indie games, and as of recently I've played a handful of enjoyable titles that I'd like to share my thoughts on. If you're looking for a channel that consistently covers various indie games in a list format, then I recommend this one. However, I'll do my best to show you the ones that I personally think could become some hidden gems. And no, none of the games here include Silksong or Blasphemous, as I'm focusing on smaller releases that I've actually had a chance to play. So, in no particular order, here are 4 games that I think are shaping to be some fantastic titles. Lords of Exile is a callback to the classic Castlevanias. It's a fairly linear action game where you wield a single weapon but also have other interchangeable ones at your disposal. The setting is pretty apparent with its inspiration, but it definitely plays much faster than the classic Castlevanias. Although something I found to be an interesting touch here is that you unlock new abilities upon defeating bosses, and you actually have to use these abilities when completing the following stages. It's not a Metroidvania by any means, but this is something that will help keep the gameplay fresh as you progress. From an atmospheric standpoint, I was a huge fan of the vibrant colors, and that each level gives you a sense of progression by constantly changing the environments around you. It could be raining in one section, or you could be getting chased down by something in the next. The music was also wonderful from what I heard in the demo, so I'm definitely expecting a memorable soundtrack. I wouldn't say Lords of Exile brings anything overly innovative to the genre, but it's definitely more than just a clone of Castlevania, as it has its own playstyle and theming. The bosses you face don't present the greatest challenge, but they're definitely unique in design, and the whole premise of the game is defeating the 7 henchmen who partook in the killing of your wife, so you have a solid backstory to go off of. I'm a huge fan of these types of games as is, but Lords of Exile definitely has its own soul to it. The next title that I had a great time playing through is Gunbrella. Now, this might look like a Metroidvania, but it plays much more like an action-adventure as you move from one objective to the next in a more linear fashion. It seems that the structure of Gunbrella will involve traversing a sort of open-world environment while also being able to complete some side missions before venturing into what you might call a dungeon. These areas have more puzzle solving, more difficult enemies, unique aesthetics, and of course a boss at the end. I for one am a huge fan of this style game, and I find it interesting that on the surface it looks like a Metroidvania, but in reality the formula seems to be much closer to a classic Zelda game. The gameplay of Gunbrella is what stuck out to me the most. You move very quickly and can pretty much do everything. You'll find new weapons that are ideal for certain situations, but you also have the ability to dash around, which kind of feels like Celeste, and you can glide with your Gunbrella. And if someone's attacking you from head on, you can use the Gunbrella to block, so it's just all around a very versatile experience. However, the atmosphere of the game is also very promising. It's a dark and mysterious world, and it's very clear you will slowly unfold the story as you progress and meet more interesting characters. I wasn't expecting to stumble onto a village full of engaging PCs when playing through the demo, but I assume there'll be plenty of other areas just like this. I was a bit iffy on if the game was actually still in development because there hadn't been anything released on it in over a year, that is just until around 2 weeks ago when a new trailer was dropped. So this is for sure a title to keep an eye out for when it's released, hopefully later this year on PC and the Switch. I did a whole preview on Rebel Transmute a while ago, but when discussing indie games to look out for, I could not leave this one out. This is a full-fledged Metroidvania with an amazing atmosphere and soundtrack. It really does a great job giving you that sense of loneliness while also exploring an alien world similar to Super Metroid. However, even though you use a gun in this title, it plays and feels surprisingly more similar to Hollow Knight. There's a community of friendly robots where you can purchase items and learn a bit more about the lore. When progressing, you want to keep an eye out for augmented abilities which you can equip at save stations. You can pick and choose which ones to use that best suit your playstyle. For example, I like to use this healing method that allowed me to continue to engage in combat while also regenerating health. In Rebel Transmute, you have to kill enemies to fill up this bar, which then allows you to heal. You can also switch out how your gun operates, so it's truly up to you on how you want to play the game. There's also plenty of exploration in Rebel Transmute, so if you're wanting to find some of the game's many secrets, you have to venture off the obvious path, or maybe tackle some difficult platforming obstacles, which is all the more rewarding. This is not an easy game either, so don't expect to just run through blasting enemies, as many of them will halt you if you're not careful, and the bosses are surely challenging. You fight 2 different bosses in the demo that both come with unique designs, soundtracks, and a variety of attacks. I remember being stuck on both of these guys for a long while before figuring out the correct way to approach them, and given that these are probably earlier bosses in the game, I can only expect that they get much more difficult. Like I said, Rebel Transmute seems to take more inspiration from Hollow Knight, but it definitely feels like its own experience that I for one am looking forward to. So I definitely recommend keeping up with this one if you're a fan of Metroidvanias. I feel like it can be difficult to make a linear action platformer stand out since there's only so much you can do with this style of game. However, Fallen Leaf manages to feel like a fresh experience in a world full of platformers. I wouldn't say anything is groundbreaking about it, but it takes concepts from a variety of games and blends it into its own. There's a moderate focus on combat as you want to pick up the in-game weapon upgrades to increase your power. However, there's just as much of an emphasis on some classic platforming. But instead of just relying on the core gameplay mechanics, you can also engage in side quests by interacting with NPCs where you can earn rewards, or partake in minigames to unlock optional secondary weapons that are actually very useful. So instead of moving from one level to the next, you might want to take a stop at the village to learn about the characters, purchase some potions, or pick up new tasks for you to do when playing through a level. The levels are also very enjoyable. Between the 6 ones I got to play on the demo, there were 3 unique soundtracks, and pretty much a new enemy introduced in each one, so I'm expecting plenty of variety from the full game. Not to mention that they even have a bestiary, which is not common for a platformer. Also, the overworld is gorgeous to look at. I think it's already become a favorite of mine for a platformer. In addition to everything I've already mentioned, there's more than one playable character. You get to switch between siblings that each play differently. She's a lot floatier and has slower attacks, but she does jump higher. Personally, this wasn't a standout to me for this game, but I'm sure many of you might enjoy those things. So if you're a fan of action platformers, then I highly recommend checking out the demo of Fallen Leaf, which is releasing later this year on Steam. One honorable mention I'd like to add here is Iron Meat. I'm not as experienced with run and guns, but based off the ones I've played, I think this is definitely something to take a look at if you like some fast-paced action and large boss fights. If it's not obvious to you, I clearly have a preference for Metroidvanias and action platformers / adventures, but I do still dabble with run and guns and beat 'em ups. However, you'll not find me covering strategy-based games or sim types, as that's just not my thing, even though I'm sure there's plenty of solid indie games coming in those genres as well. This is my first video doing this format, so as I continue to grow the channel and experiment with upcoming games, I'm sure I'll do some more in the future. But let me know in the comments below if you plan to pick up any of these upon release, and if you have any suggestions for me, just let me know. So, until next time.